So hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special panel focusing on China's smart cities. With the rise of innovation and digitalization, countries looking for solutions to balance economic, technological, and societal development are leveraging on IT, infrastructure, and urban planning to develop smart cities. The aim to improve energy efficiency, minimize greenhouse gas emissions, and improve the quality of life for the city's citizens. Now, these cities are livable, they're alive, they're sustainable, and they're innovative. So while we acknowledge China's profound history, this time, however, we want to show you another side of China. This is a new China, a country arming itself with the technology to be stronger, more modern, and efficient. And just to note, there is simultaneous interpretation provided throughout this panel discussion. Joining me to discuss the development, challenges, and future of China's smart cities are our panelists today. I'd like to introduce Benson Tan. He's the founder and CEO of Venturous Group, China's first Citytech group. Venturous is both an investor, business builder, and operator of smart Citytech infrastructure companies to make cities more livable. He's a 30-year private equity veteran with a focus on China tech. Next, we have Esther Wong. She's managing director of strategic investments at SenseTime, a leading AI software company founded in Hong Kong. She oversees the company's strategic investments and capital markets, plays a leading role in establishing business relations with long-term strategic partners to create SenseTime-centered AI ecosystem. We have Dr. Chuang, founder and chairman of WAYZ.AI, a technology leader in spatio-temporal AI. He's a world-leading expert in geomantics. He's a serial entrepreneur, for example, former partner and CEO of the streaming platform PPTV. Dr. Jonathan Woetzel spent the last 37 years at McKinsey & Company, now a senior partner based out of Shanghai, director of McKinsey Global Institute, the firm's global leader of its city's special initiative. He has also authored 5 books on China. And we have Ava Lee, Managing Director and Head of Greater China Equities at UBS Global Wealth Management, Chief Investment Office. Among various sectors she has covered, the Hong Kong and China property sector for the last 21 years. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this panel. It's terrific to have you all with us today. I'll start, as I mentioned earlier, to spend a little bit of time with you individually before opening up to you as a panel as a whole. Benson, if I could start with you, why are you focusing on China for smart city tech?
Well, thank you, Lorraine. I guess, first of all, I've been doing private equity for 30 years, and the last 20 years, I was lucky enough to see the rise of the Chinese internet. So the whole technology going through that. And what I've been seeing is that 20 years ago, the first generation internet came. Then 10 years later, the mobile internet came. And I've been expecting the third generation internet to be coming. And basically what we are seeing today is what I call the city internet, which is basically where the city internet interconnects the whole smart city. This is a massive market. This is happening right now. And I would like to say that China is leading the way in this.
And what do you think are the key success factors or factor for China to speed up building these smart city tech cities?
Well, I think for 2 reasons, I would say, Lorraine. Number one is that I think everybody understands that China is one of what we call infrastructure sort of master constructor, whether it's inside of China, building bridges, building very tall skyscrapers. Infrastructure is the name card for China for the last 20, 30 years. That's number one. Number two is, if you then look at the cities that were built in China in the last 30 years, you have Shenzhen, you have Pudong, you have the new Hangzhou. There's so many of these. In fact, I was saying, if you look at every city, they were all built in the last 30 years. So both in terms of infrastructure and city. And then thirdly, you then look at the last 20 years in terms of the rise of the China internet. It really has swapped from, in a sense, China copy from the world to now you have the world copying TikToks of China, copying Alipay of China. And so that's why both in terms of the city, the technology, but also the infrastructure, all three are their strong point. And smart city is right in the middle of everything. That's why.
Right. Benson, thank you so very much. Let me move to Esther. Hi, Esther. First of all, let me congratulate you on the news of your stock price is doing very well. I guess it's fueled by that white paper that was issued, showing that China's digital economy is now worth what, 45.5 trillion yuan? I mean, this is huge, right?
Yeah. Well, so thank you, Lorraine. First of all, I would like to say that it's such a pleasure to be here and to be with our other panelists to discuss this very exciting topic. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity. So thank you again, Lorraine. So yes, China, going back to what Benson was saying, do you think the Chinese government that support the digital economy? The answer is absolutely yes. Actually, before even this white paper was published, we can see a lot of continuation of support for these truly deep tech, 硬科技 companies and sectors has been receiving a lot of favorable policy. Going back all the way to the 19th five-year plan, you already say that the government has stipulated very clearly that AI, 5G, for instance, these are the fundamental infrastructure for a digital future. And they have been giving a lot of prioritized policy to support these sectors. So we are very fortunate to be one of them. And again, going back to President Xi's 20大, it also stipulated that digitalization is one of the key priority of the future economy. Again, being the largest AI company in China in terms of computer vision, we are the infrastructure layer of the whole digitalization. So yes, the Chinese government is very supportive of this whole high tech sector, especially AI and 5G. Yes.
And you don't see any sort of slowing down right now as a result of what's happening both in China and globally?
Once people get used to technology, it's very hard to go back. So now that you use, let's say if you're a smartphone, you're so used to your smartphone now, you probably have a hard time going back to Nokia. So same thing with smart city. So what defines a smart city? I'll give an example, right? So for instance, smart city is all about a city management. For instance, if the city has a lot of illegal parking, for instance, and how do you get rid of those illegal parking? Or in China, there's a lot of share bikes. Well, when you see the share bikes, how do you immediately take action? Or sometimes, unfortunately, there could be fire. You immediately inform the fire department. Or if there's a flooding, you immediately inform the right department. So these things used to be monitored by human eyes, because there's camera all over and there's human eyes taking a look. But what AI did and what AI mean for a smart city is that instead of you having all these people look at it, the AI will look at it. So more manpower could be used to actually resolving the issue rather than looking at whether the issue happened. So it's a significantly more efficient city. So that's what makes a city smart. And yes, once you get used to it, once you use this kind of efficiency and convenience, it's very hard to go back.
Yeah, you do have a point there. That's true. I understand that SenseTime has businesses around the world. In which part of the world are we seeing sort of quick adaptation to this?
So first and foremost, we are a Hong Kong-based company, so we do have offices in 11 different cities globally. We're seeing very, very strong adaptation in China, first and foremost, because China has this mandate to do it, and we've been flourishing. So if you look at all the Tier 1 cities in China, in terms of smart city software, we dominate. And you're seeing that, even with that being said, the adaptation rate for all the AI in terms of the AI adaptation rate is still relatively low. Okay, so you're talking about less than maybe 1% or less than 2% of all the camera in China is being AI enabled. So you still see that even though we keep talking about smart city, we're still talking about a lot of potential market upside, actually. So I think China is definitely one. But that being said, as a company, we do pride ourselves with saying that AI should be a tool to improve all humanities, not just within a particular region. So we are seeing very fast adaptation also in Southeast Asia and also in North Asia. So we have customers from Japan, in Korea, Singapore is using a lot of our technology, and also Middle East as well. So going back to what Benson was saying, when you build a new city, you are free to design it whatever way you want. And so there's a lot of very exciting infrastructure projects in the Middle East. And from day one in the planning, they put a lot of AI element into it. So yeah, we're seeing very quick adaptation globally.
Right, interesting. And very quickly, what can the world learn from China and what it's been doing?
You mean in terms of smart city?
Yep.
Or in terms of AI?
Smart city?
I think that China actually give a very good role model on how to plan the smart city. So for instance, in Shenzhen, right, I'll give you a good example. In Shenzhen, there are 200,000 cameras in the city center, of which 100,000 of them is actually linked with AI technology. So we can actually tell that the bigger the city gets, the more complicated the solution it needs. Okay, so but however, the same goes to a tier 3, tier 4 cities, is that the smaller the city gets, the lesser they need in some ways, but still all the key parts need to be interconnected. So the data in the big city needs to be shared with the data in the small city. And so that together as a web, the smart city is the most efficient once it's linked together. So I think China actually showcased a very good way in terms of adaptation, how it moves from bigger city adaptation to a smaller city adaptation, so that the whole country as a whole can be quite safe. And I think that is a very unique experiment that we're doing.
Right. Thank you very much, Esther. Let me bring in Dr. Tao now. Dr. Tao, what do you think are the technology trends in city tech?
All right. Yes. All right. The city tech, I think this is a quite interesting a new term, and they're called city tech. And actually, our company is 100% really focused on the city tech. And the very big thing happening in China is the big data and the artificial intelligence. That's China really driven by the massive data collections in the last 20 years. And you probably know in the China, among the digital, among the physical construction of the infrastructure, and China initiate they call it digital infrastructure. Means that they place a lot of the sensors among the cities, places, buildings everywhere, and including cameras and a lot of IoT devices. Even China alone, and there's about 110 million IoT devices produced and being equipment with the city infrastructure. So they have started to collect huge amounts of data, which has made a very good infrastructure for big data and AI industry. So city tech, I think in China, if I compare with many other countries, and since I've been living in North America for 15 years, and we found, and China probably is the largest test field for the city tech companies like us, and including like SenseTime as well. And we all benefit from the use of the massive data for the artificial intelligence and the new approaches, tech approaches for help city and make the life better.
What do you think are the challenges or even the opportunities you see in smart city or AI as a whole?
The challenge, of course, and one issue I think a lot of people are gonna talk about is the privacy and also security as well. And but in fact, in China, and I think the government did really well on impose many different rules in terms of the use of the data. And China also is one of the first country in the world starting to build something they call the data trading center, just like a stock exchange. So they basically put the laws in place to encourage the data trading among the government institutions and the companies. and using a secured manner, for example, like blockchain technology, such and such, and to stimulate the data industry and also stimulate the AI companies.
Right. Can I bring in the issue of metaverse? I mean, considering China's digital economy is now, as I read, about 40% of gross domestic product, I would assume that this will really power the metaverse market.
Right, that's very interesting, and the metaverse becomes phenomena. The fact in China, and everybody was talking about the metaverse. If I go to talking to my friends in North America, they say, "What the heck is the metaverse?" And China not even talking about the meta cities and meta towns, meta buildings, and meta cars, and you name it. And the wave of this digital economy is happening so dramatically in China. I think, as Benson mentioned earlier, President Xi really encouraged the building the digital infrastructure in parallel with the physical infrastructure, because China has invested huge amounts of dollars, trillions, on building the physical infrastructure. Now it's time to turn those physical infrastructure into a more smart assets by using the digital transformation, and as well as the data and the AI technology. And the meta city, and in the realm of the smart cities, I will basically means the new approach of experience the city lives. And with the new devices, such as a few years ago, we probably everybody not just like talking like with the Zoom, we're probably gonna wear glasses to talk somewhere in the in some virtual space, and so we're gonna experience the city lives like that. And our company also have built some prototypes, and we built like a 4-kilometer wide city zone and made it as a meta city, and you can just use your phone, then you can experience very different lives. For example, you take a photo of your building, you can find the rental places, you can find something on sale. You can, if you take a photo of your the shopping center, and you are not just seeing like 200 the stores, you actually can see 2,000 and stores and virtual stores just with your camera. So this meta city concept is actually happening in China, not happening elsewhere. And not just about city life, and of course for tourism, for museum, for entertaining, sports, all kind of things. You can experience very different new ways with your camera, with your like phones, and the future with glasses. So when you walk on the streets, you by wearing the glasses, you're gonna feel very different. The streets, and everyone may see the very different space, a different world. So this happening in China now. So that's very exciting.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, I feel a bit scared just listening to you. So is this how the metaverse and the technology behind it will empower future smart cities?
That's right. And so the way the China way, I think is quite unique in its own. And this is something probably most Western may not be understand really well. So even we explain this with my friends, they'll be very surprised how possible the China government invests so much money on promoting the technology, the techs, just like Benson mentioned about it, and he's very positive about the China, the progress, and as well as their improvement in terms of their the CityTech, the technologies. So there's a lot of technology around of it. Because the city is such a complex. You see, city is very dynamic. It's much more complex than like a manufacturing, than any other scenarios. And in Shanghai, you'll be very surprising. And in Shanghai, and we in the Shanghai policies, they promote, of course, AI. They classify the AI into 3 top scenarios. Number 1 is AI power for fintech. Number 2 is AI for medicine. And the third is AI for cities. So those are 3 top scenarios and promoted by the Shanghai government. And we're very proud of, and we've been part of the Citytech and the AI for cities.
Thank you. We'll definitely chat a bit more about these things when I bring everybody in, but let me bring Dr. Jonathan Woetzel in. Dr. Woetzel, what is McKinsey doing, in this smart space?
Thanks, Lorraine. And it's really a pleasure to hear from the entrepreneurs and investors to get the points of view here. We are obviously consultants, but we're doing perhaps a bit more than that. First of all, one of my hats is as one of the directors of the McKinsey Global Institute, which is our internal research organization. So we are doing lots of research and publishing lots of research, and I would encourage everybody to go look on the McKinsey website and just MGI.com. It's easy to find. Plenty of reports on smart cities, free. The other thing that we're doing, of course, is consulting, and we do work with a very broad range, from public sector and city governments to investors to real estate and infrastructure to technology companies. And a lot of it is about the scaling of the proposition. So what does it take to unlock this adoption? And then how does one iterate on that to create a better set of products and services around it? So it's the second thing we're doing. And then a third thing, as you learn in McKinsey, everything is in threes, is investing. And so we are actively building a venture portfolio, which is very closely linked, of course, to our consulting and our research work. And I think that's exciting for us. It sort of leads to a little bit more flexibility as in how we engage and how we partner ultimately with entrepreneurs and investors in transforming the city.
Yeah, that's interesting. What are your clients actually asking you? What are their concerns? What do they want to know from you?
I think it's first of all mostly about impact. So at what point does this translate into a meaningful engagement with your target audience? Now, of course, I'm sort of phrasing it generally because public sector is different from private, let alone from philanthropy, which we also get involved with. So, and I think that, the public sector is definitely looking more at the sort of holistic set of impact indicators. It's like, you mentioned convenience, I think, Esther, that was absolutely one of those things, but will this save lives? Will this clean up the environment? Will this reduce carbon? Will this make me happier? So all those things are important from general, they're important period, but certainly from a public sector perspective, there tend to be the decision-making items. If we're looking from private sector, well, there is the thing that you're trying to do. So does this allow me to be a better mobility company, a healthcare provider? And then of course, what's the economics thereof? And so how does one translate an interesting idea into a scalable use case, which has technical aspects too? Of course, there's an architecture to be done, but a lot of it is, I would argue, quite similar to most growth type initiatives. It's like one has to figure things out in terms of the business model, the value chain, the management team, and many other things that have to come together. So in that sense, it's of a kind of our traditional consulting work, but it's done in a space that is very dynamic, very fast moving, and ultimately very, very rewarding because I can sort of explain to my kids what I do. So I see it's different. This hospital works differently.
Right. And obviously, you talk about being dynamic and changing all the time. It obviously has to be tailored as well, correct?
Yeah, there is. I'm an urbanist by background, so there is no generic city. Every city is its own thing, and we all have a unique set of inheritance, and both physical, geographic, as Dr. Tao would tell us, that the mapping of it, it's as well as everything else that has gone into make up a city, the type of food that we eat, the places we came from, the family structure, the industrial structure. So all of that is to say, there is no one size fits all solution. That said, the whole point of this is that I would view smart tech as a meta technology. It's a technology of technologies, and in that sense, the pieces are generic. There will be a sensor. of some sort, that we have to collect the data, whether that's a microphone or a camera or any other, or a decibel meter reading or whatever it is. So there's that. There is an analytical engine, which is that you take that data and you do something with it. You actually make a decision on your traffic, on your healthcare, on your environment, or whatever. And then finally, there is a customer. That customer can be either the consumer and the citizen, the resident, the traveler, or it could be an institution, a network, where you're basically taking that information and doing something with it. And that customer has to actually do something. From our point of view, the tailoring is all about understanding what's the right type of sensors, which kind of analytical engine, and who's the customer. What are they supposed to do with this thing?
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to go through Ava, and then we're going to raise some other sort of big, broader issues that I think all of you can contribute to. Ava, thank you for waiting. And can I ask you about the 20th Party Congress report and what that means for the future of China's smart cities?
Thank you, Lorraine, for inviting us to join this panel. In regards to your questions about 20 Party Congress, I think a lot of people focus probably would be on, the new leaders. But in fact, when we look into the details of the Party Congress, there's been a high focus on how to strengthen the productivity, how to improve the resilience in the industrial supply chain. Because we all know that the pandemic has definitely created, some impact onto the global supply chain. It's not just in China. But having said that, after this, sort of impact, I think not just China, all the economies are looking on how to protect the supply chain. And obviously, given the geopolitical tension, this is also an important topic for China. And having said that, on top of that, they are looking to achieve high quality growth. And in terms of urbanization topic, they no longer just talk about a rate of urbanizations to achieve. They're talking about targeting urbanizations. So when we sort of bring this overall idea together, you will find that actually the smart city would be able to offer a lot, like, for example, achieving quality growth. We all know that within the smart city, we use big data, we use AI to improve the average productivity, in particular, what we call the IoT, IT, like in terms of industrial-wise, how we use big data to improve the productivity. And then on top of that, in terms of supply chain, how we use big data to improve the logistics of the supply chain. And as a result, they could sort of with the use of minimal labor, they're able to achieve a similar, efficiency. And then finally, of course, the average living conditions of locals. Like, obviously, there have been talks about, with a lot of people moving into the urban city, how they can maintain like a quality living conditions. AI, big data, and also the modernized infrastructure and public transportation network would definitely help to uplift the average, local living conditions. So I think even though they don't mention, smart city in particular, but when you look at what the directions and target, what they want to achieve, in fact, smart city becomes like a top-up umbrella, embracing a lot of these potential goals and directions that Chinese governments want to build China into in the coming not just 5 years. If you look at the target from now until 2035, this is something China wants to build, which is embraced by smart city. And of course, the vision is what they call the socialist modernization's visions. I think this is something we have to understand. Basically, it provides a backbone for governments to sort of build and develop China onwards into this sort of 5, 10, or 15 years visions.
Right. And Eva, where do you see the key investment opportunities when we talk about, China forming a network of these smart cities?
Before I, sort of address your questions, let me sort of sort of roll back and talk about smart city basically include 6 very important building blocks. First, smart connectivity, smart governance, smart services, smart automations, smart health, and smart mobility. All these 6 areas actually form the building blocks for smart city. The reasons why I mention all this is because this is where the potential investment opportunities are. For example, if you talk about smart connectivity, obviously, I think a lot of discussions is about how we use big data, AI, but the key backbone is actually 5G. Without 5G as an infrastructure, you cannot process so much big data, and you cannot rely on the big data to do all the analysis. So as a result, if you talk to a lot of the top 3 telecom carrier, they will tell you that now my business growth is in cloud computing. So cloud computing become the growth driver, and obviously they're leveraging on, this sort of smart city development. Second, smart mobility. Definitely China has an edge in terms of EV car sales, EV charging stations. Basically, all these infrastructure network has been built out for the past 10 or 15 years. So now we have been seeing a lot of this EV manufacturer, no matter on OEM or the supply chain, they are benefiting from this high volumes of EV cars demand. And then obviously EV servicing is part of it. And then, and we consider, like lately, if you look back of these few sectors, in particular EV cars and supply chain, because they're growth sector, they have been undergoing some pressure because people worry about growth, higher yields, higher rates. Should I give a valuation similar to what I used to be when interest rates are a lot lower? But in fact, when you're talking about medium to longer term, these companies, they are actually in earnings. They are giving you resilient cash flow because of this, continued and sustainable demand. So I think this is also another area for investment opportunities. Lastly, on cybersecurity. And I think this is, again, it's not just China. Cybersecurity is a very important regulatory focus. I would say started from the US, from the developed regions, and now also in China. And we consider this is probably a bit of neglected because this is a sector just started to flourish. But I think this is something a must if you want to operate in the technology regions. You need to protect your data of your clients. And plus, when you involve so much of these public data involving privacy, so cybersecurity, it's definitely another investment angles that is also, you can say, linked with the smart cities development.
All very good points, Eva. Thank you very much. Let me bring everybody in now. And we talk about the big issues. We talk about changing from old to new. We realize it isn't that easy. You're disrupting existing systems. There's a lot of money to pay. There's politics. There's vested interest. There's significant investment with maybe distant returns. So I would ask you a practical question in terms of how these smart cities actually help and actually improve people's lives. Esther, can I bring you in? What do you think?
The adaptation is obviously going to be much wider and much more propagate. So I think Benson actually raised a very good point. So we're trying to actually do a lot of things that China is, in a way, is adopting a lot faster than a lot of the foreign countries. I'll give you an example. Right? I think you probably remember the Paris, the Notre Dame was burned down. Actually, at least the spire was burned down. As a matter of fact, I was actually shocked, but it took the firefighters in Paris almost 2 hours before they reached the site. This is actually incredible to me because this will never happen in China. Because as a city gets smart, we have detectors that can tell whether this fire breaks out, so that it would, if let's say, God forbid, right, touch wood, let's say the Palace Museum has a fire, the firefighter would know immediately in 15 seconds. So things could be done immediately, right? And it's very unfortunate because there's a recent tragedy in Korea where a lot of people was unfortunately victims of a stampede. Now, this actually happened in Shanghai before. Remember, there was a New Year's Eve in Shanghai. I remember it was almost 8 years ago. There was also a stampede, resulting in the death of 200 people. So what happened is that Shanghai government has immediately adopted Smart AI, so to do flow and crowd control. So they will not have a lot of people to congregate at the same time, too many people to block traffic and block potential exit path. So since then, we don't have a single case of stampede. Now, touch wood, thank God. And I feel very bad for these victims, but I do believe that this is a great example of how smart city can actually save life. So, and I think China is actually taking a lead in that sense, and the world is actually can take some of China's lesson and hopefully can quickly implement in the area that would actually enhance the quality of life of its people. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Tao, I'll bring you in now. And before you mentioned one word, and that was privacy. And if you read a lot of the comments in newspapers, magazines, and so on and so forth, there is a concern that technology and surveillance go hand in hand. And I'd like to get your take on this.
All right, this is a very sensitive topic, and let me just bring up maybe two applications that my company be involved, and then people can sense what the privacy can play here. The first, of course, we'll talk about the COVID-19, and I've been involved in the Wuhan and, of course, the Shanghai, and so I was, being locked at home and for 2 months when I was in Shanghai. That was a few months ago. My company actually involved. We use AI technology to help government to predict where and to predict the places where they have a higher risky of getting affected by the COVID-19. We use the dynamics of a people's trajectory, and of course, the data was offered by the mobile operators, and to predict the people and to track the people where they've been affected. And like a first tier and a second tier, the influencer, also and so forth. So it's very complicated, the dynamic data analysis. So we built this for its entire country, for the entire population. That's over 1.4 billion, and based on all the social mobile data. So if you will, this is definitely that's going to involve in the privacy. Of course, all those calculation, analytics, and the AI tools being conducted in the very, very secured walled-garden network. It's not exposed to any public. And so this has been done to prevent the spread of the COVID-19. So that's of course, you can see in China, this is probably the best, safest country in the world being able to control the COVID-19 in terms of spread. Even though there's all the people can find in China, maybe there's a 10 persons being affected, like a 19. We talk about digits, but in the other countries we talk about minutes. And this is I think there'll be thanks to the AI technology, thanks to the data being collected by the central government. But all this data again. In fact, those data have been collected by the other companies as well, like in the other countries. But China, they've been those data being very, very treated securely and the highly secured way. The second application I want to mention about is just a bike sharing. China is a big bike country, and the people use bikes for transportation, commute, and stuff like that. And at one time, because of a lot of investment in the bike sharing industry, people think the bike sharing is really good business. And so you can see the bikes being everywhere on the streets. So now the China start to use AI technology. Of course, my company be involved. We basically calculate the population density, dynamics, commute time, and those stuff. Then we place the right amount of bikes in the closest to the buildings, shopping centers, the societies and stuff like that. So now you can see the city is being well managed by the bikes in terms of volume and the place to place those bikes. All of this based on the sensors being mounted on each bike. Actually, all those bikes being sensed and traced using the global positioning systems. And again, of course, you are collecting all this amount of data, which is true, and that's in some way collecting a lot of private data, I would say. But in terms of privacy issue, is how well you manage the data, how you can have a safe, a secure way, attack to protect the data. On one hand, the data extraction, without the data, I would say there's no AI at all. But with the data, and as long as your security and the law has been in place, you really can make sense of the data and derive the values of the data to help the solving all these problems. As I mentioned about like the Korean, the issues and some other issues, and that's probably never happen in China.
Right.
I want to jump in here, Lorraine, because privacy is such a almost knee-jerk reaction. Every time I talk about smart city, everybody asks me privacy. And I have a very different answer to what Dr. Tao said, which is, I call it the maid, the maid, the banker, and the doctor answer. What do I mean? I still remember the first time we have a maid, we find our privacy was invaded. Here is somebody actually living with us. But if the maid doesn't live with us and invade our privacy, how on earth does she provide service? Right? Secondly, the banker. You have to give the banker all the data about your most private assets, your will, who your families are, what their priorities are. Unless you give them this privacy, which is KYC, the banker cannot provide the service. And lastly, of course, the doctor. The doctor has all of your most private data, but you still give it to him because you realize that unless I do that, unless I share it, I cannot get service. So my answer to all of these questions is there's always a balance between privacy and service. You want the service, you have to give up some privacy. The question is, do you trust that professional? The maid, the banker, the doctor. I think the question is it trustworthy? When we share the data with the government, do we trust that there are laws to us not being abused? When we share it with businesses, the same. When we share it with others, the same. So it's actually not just privacy. There's no absolute privacy. Anybody using an Apple smartphone, Apple knows everything about you, but you never worry about it because you trust Apple. So I actually think privacy and service is the balance, and the key is trust.
Hey, Dr. Woetzel, I need to bring you in on this.
Well, I think you're right. It's a tricky question, and I think that this is ultimately a question of values in a societal sense, and sort of where do we draw the line? Where do people feel comfortable with sharing, and what is the definition of consent? When you pass in front of a camera, did you give consent? Maybe you should have ducked. Or do you ask somebody to sign a piece of paper saying, I give consent? You have these long forms now about, and who reads them really, but at the end is, do you have to check the box? So, I mean, we all our systems have a model for providing consent and for what is personally identifiable information. There's no society which doesn't have a category which is personally identifiable information. But the way we define that and the way in which we allow it to be used does vary quite a lot. So, I think that what this again does is it expands the terrain. It's not like we haven't had this point of view before. Your neighbor has always had a point of view on you. Now she has some more information. So the question is, how does he or she get to use that, if at all, and what's allowed. I mean, and I think that is that is a good place for us to stop, because I don't think there is one size fits all. I think that we do have very different attitudes towards what's shareable and what should be shareable and why.
If I can jump in on this, right? Because we do a lot of implementation, so we do have a lot of experience how to deal with this. And first and foremost, I believe that all the AI development should be human-centric, should be sustainable as well, right? So with that in mind, we do think that especially in terms of smart city, in a way, AI actually improves the privacy. And why do I say that? So yes, why do I say that? Because think about it, right? All these IoT devices, all these cameras has been there already. It's always been there. So what happened in the past is that they have people. Actually, usually it's the police, right? It's the people in the control center using a pair of eyes to watch. They're always watching. They watch things that they're supposed to watch, then they watch things that they're not supposed to watch. So you have no privacy because the human brain does not filter. But now with the power of AI, you only watch stuff that you're supposed to watch, i.e. when it's a car crash, is there someone getting beaten up? Is anything else supposed to happening? So you actually get a very clear defining what is watchable. So this is actually in a way improving privacy. So this is what happened in our experience as well.
And if I'm allowed, then I totally agree. But I think what it does is just moves the locus of the decision making. Because now it's not with the observer, it's with the algorithmic designer. And it's like, to what point what type of data are you allowed to collect and where? That actually is a very interesting decision. So,
yeah.
I got to bring Eva into this. And another concern, of course, that's being brought up is that in a lot of these major urban developments, there are lots of private companies who are very involved with the development of public spaces, whatever the public spaces may be. And do you see this as an issue or a problem?
Well, I think I don't see a problem with that. And in fact, if you look at not just China, again, I mean, in the global markets, we have been seeing private enterprise involved in public projects, no matter it's infrastructure or the telecom network, this has been the case. So as a result, we were not too sort of worry about this. Everyone have sort of expectations like what is involved, how the government will pay me back, cost structure, how do we construct that? This is something. In fact, with a bit of trust between the government and the private enterprise, a lot of these projects are managed to carry out professionally. And usually they will have a legal framework to protect the both parties. So, I don't think is it because Smart City, you got a new name and you worry about it? No, I don't think so.
Benson, I bring you in again. And again, this human aspect of it. When we think about being in these wonderful smart cities that, yes, we could call the ambulance in 5 minutes instead of 20. The question is, of course, is that people now are being put in these boxes and they have sort of a set way of doing things. Big Daddy's watching, blah, blah, blah. And to some, that limits the potential of people growing and discovering something outside of their taste. I mean, it's all well and good to have a smart city determine, how well I can live, but there's that boundary there. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, Lorraine. Very good question, which is how much should be central planned and how much should be just let 100 flowers blossom?
Nice way of putting it, yes.
Right? Central planned economy versus market economy, which is basically, Big Daddy says this is good for you, so eat it. Whereas compared to, I like the ice cream, so I'm going to do it however bad it does to my body. I think there is a balance there. And that is why just now when we were talking about it, I think the new smart city is what I call a public-private partnership. It's not a pure market economy. It's not a pure central plan economy. It's a mixture. Okay, you have to have the government involved to architect the whole thing, but you also cannot allow them to dictate everything because everybody has different taste. So everything is a public-private partnership. That's number one. Number two is think of cities like a product, and the customer should be king. Now, the reason why I say that is I'm sure most of you chose the property development that you're living in, you know, a small little community, and you picked it. I like this because this one has better hardware, better management office, better location. I think in the future, you would choose a city exactly like that. You just say, I prefer this to that. And in China now, for example, there are already 800 smart cities. And so basically you just say, you know, my daughter, when she will definitely says, you know what, I like that. You know, I don't like the other one. The other one is a little bit too central plan. I feel like very straitjacketed. Now, the beauty is that this becomes competitive. You know, if people don't like your city, people just move to another one. Okay, and that city becomes the preferred one. And so if you imagine how you choose a residential community, I think in the future you choose the city. So I have faith because there's going to be so much competition between cities. I think globally, every city is like one residential block, and everybody have to attract and convince our customers, the citizens, that we have the best balance. You know, if you're worried about privacy more, then go to the one that gives you more privacy. If you want more service and willing to sacrifice some of that, you go to another one. So to each their own taste. So this is, again, you asked a very good question. But my faith is that in the future, I actually see city as a technology product. It's not one size fits all, and everybody will have their own flavor, and you choose. Yeah.
Good points. So I'd like to throw out just one final question. Obviously, it's a little bit broad, but I wanted to get everybody involved and say their piece before we conclude this panel. And that is, you know, with uncertainty globally, where do you think will be the strongest force in accelerating and developing smart cities in the future? And may I start with Eva?
Well, I think, in fact, people might believe that, you know, how the geopolitical tension, how the deglobalizations, these are all looks like negative word. But in fact, because of all these, you know, global development, that will make each of these developed or emerging markets try to lift the technology know-how, lifting the local people living conditions amid of all these, you know, sort of changing dynamics in the global markets. And in fact, this will be the key factor, which I talk about how the you know, Chinese Party Congress talk about how I need to lift the local people productivity, the efficiency. This is something we need smart city to sort of give us the backbone to support the development. And in fact, pandemic, global development, geopolitical risk, actually, we are bringing, you know, something very good for the local people.
Thank you. Dr. Woetzel?
Well, Lorraine, again, a great question. And I would, I could give you the entire McKinsey speech, which would then sort of be a little long. So I won't do that, I promise. So, but I want to use someone else's words. She's much better than me. Arundhati Roy, and she gave a bit of a talk at the close of the pandemic and in London. You don't have to necessarily agree with her politics, but I found this to be incredibly moving. So, and her words were, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks, our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. I think that's what will drive us towards the smarter city, is our desire to fight for a better world. And that's the most powerful force on the planet.
And very well put. Thank you very much. Dr. Tao.
Well, I think China now is the largest investor and constructor of the physical infrastructure, as Benson mentioned about it, and also for a digital infrastructure for smart cities. And China, I believe, is about 1/3 of investment of total global in terms of investment size. Maybe McKinsey can give us more concrete data. So they're not just biggest investor for digital infrastructure, but also biggest, I think, stimulator or driving force. Even like SenseTime, we mentioned about it, and also my company have a great chunk of income coming from the government side, as well as primarily related to the technology empowerment for smart cities. So we actually talk about the smart city. I think there's 2-tier things. First tier is the safety, security, and privacy. And also we talk a lot about this one. And given my experience living on both sides of the world, because I've been living in North America for 15 years, now moved back to China for another 13 years. So when I compare to these two city lives, and definitely China is much more safer because of the data, as I've already mentioned about a lot of things, the sense that's been produced. But even for privacy side, that's the one thing I want to add that. And because in GDPR, that's in the European privacy standard, and also compared to China, called the CDPR, if you compare the two standards, China is much more restrictive. It's much more restrictive in terms of privacy law. And China now, for any company who owns more than 1 million personal data, will be safeguarded. So this is, in another countries, actually, even for private company, we can collect or we can manage a lot of data as much as possible. But in China, it's very different. So they actually strengthen their law in terms of control the data, the data spreading, and also, as I mentioned about it, they build a data trading center, just like a data exchange, just like a stock exchange, basically help people to use a regularized approach to exchange data instead of people trading data like in other countries. Even they trading data like a business model, but China basically put a very restricted way in terms of data exchange. So that is the approach they've been doing. Again, I did want to emphasize that, and China is probably the largest, the test field for a lot of startup company or private company to test their CityTech technology because they have offered the data and offer the applications and a lot of scenarios for people to bring more innovation and into the CityTech applications. Yeah.
Thank you. Esther.
I want to say I couldn't agree with Dr. Tao more. As a matter of fact, to do AI, you need 4 ingredients. You need a lot of data, you need the algorithm, and then you need the hardware, AI DC center for the data to run on. And last but not least, you need a feedback loop. So the beauty of having a large population is that, first and foremost, you get a lot of data, but also the feedback loop is very fast. Whether this works or if it doesn't work, it will tell you immediately. So this is very important. And this is the kind of ingredient to have a great AI, hence a great smart city. So going back to your question, in 5 to 10 years, where do you see the most growth of smart city? I believe that in 5 to 10 years, a lot of the world will have smart city. It's not a matter of who will grow fastest. Maybe a better question is who will have the strongest penetration rate. Because the city can do a lot of things, right? So for instance, a city can be called smart city if it can only detect fire, What if it, but there's so many different products that would come along with the smart city that the city can pick and choose what else you want to do. Do you want to have a flooding prevention system? Do you want to have a crowd control system? Do you want to have a lot of other add-ons? So a matter of penetration rate, and I believe that China in that case takes the lead, because going back to, I think one of the previous, I think you mentioned actually, Lorraine, a lot of this investment initially might not be super profitable, right? So it's important that we actually have a central planning, in a sense that the government has to have a top-down will to do that. And you're looking around the world, for these kind of government that has a strong, clarified, intense will to do smart city, I believe Barnum is China. So I believe that in 5 to 10 years, a lot of cities will have smart city features, but in terms of the actual penetration rate and effectiveness, I believe that China will actually still likely to take the crown. And also, I would like to add one point on privacy. I know we talk about privacy a lot, and I also want to echo Dr. Tao, because for AI to do well, we need a lot of data. And of course, privacy is a bigger and bigger issue. So I believe that China is also one of the first countries to actually standardize a lot of the privacy rules. I'll give you an example, right? So, you drive, I believe that a lot of maybe our audience drives a Tesla. Every time when you drive a Tesla, you're actually giving the company some data. They're going to use it to do some analytics, so the next Tesla model, they will have better functionality, right? So going back to China, the world's EV, half of them is being sold in China. But obviously, China's EV companies, they might not have the brain power as Tesla. So what do? They still want the data to be analyzed. So instead of having these just randomly being sent to people without touching a lot of potential privacy issue, we actually cleanse the data. There's a standardized data cleansing procedure. You cleanse it before you upload it. So we get rid of data that we don't need. For instance, we don't need a driver plate. We don't need a license plate number, right? We don't know how many people use in the car. So your privacy is being protected before the data is being analyzed. And I believe from that perspective, China is ahead in many, many regards.
Right. Thank you very much. Okay, Benson, I started with you. I'm going to end with you.
So very simple. To cut to the chase, you're asking what is the driving force for smart cities? I would start by saying cities compete for people like us. I imagine every single one of the 6 of us are not living in our hometown, correct? We moved to another city. The city attracted us, okay? Now, I actually believe that in the future, the only thing that is important is the successful cities would have a brain gain. The dumb cities will have a brain drain. And that's all that matters, okay? That's the number 1 KPI. Do you have a brain drain or a brain gain? Now, how do you attract people? Now, that is not just one size fits all. People go to where the opportunities are. People go to where the money is. People go to where the best companies are. People go to where I can live best, where the best schools are. Everything all integrated into one complex whole, and we decide to emigrate, okay? So that's why my answer to you is that cities will have no choice but to compete by being smart, because we will be living in a digital economy. The best companies are tech companies, just like SenseTime, right, Esther? Wherever SenseTime will be.
Naturally.
Correct.
Naturally.
Just like Shanghai, just like, wherever, Hong Kong, just like Singapore. And I think we don't need to decide. The cities are competing. And the weapon of choice that you will compete with is smartness. That's my answer.
Great. We got to leave it there. Hope we brought the viewers and people watching some insights. Thank you all very, very much. Benson, Esther, Dr. Tao, Dr. Woetzel, and Eva. Really, really appreciate it. I mean, for me, the key messages, of course, is the smart city is here for now. There's a commitment from the Chinese government. China is a great place to get tested because, I guess, of the population. And if you really want to live a better life, where else but to think about a smart city? So thank you all so, so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Lorraine.